climate change, 12 years to save the planet. Make that 18 months. A guy by the name of Matt McGrath, who's an environmental correspondent for the BBC. Okay. Do you remember the good old days when we had 12 years to save the planet? Now it seems there's a growing consensus that the next 18 months will be critical in dealing with the global heating crisis. Among other environmental challenges, like trying to convince the population that if we just listen to our leaders, we can change and even control the weather. That's a little bit difficult to do. That would be other environmental challenges, convincing people that the capitalist environment needs to change to a socialist environment in order to get this off the ground. So what do we do with this? Climate change, 12 years to save the planet. Oh, scratch that. Make that 18 months. Well, I wanted to bring in the author of Inconvenient Facts, the science that Al Gore doesn't want you to know about. Once again, Gregory Wrightstone is back with us. Greg, how are you, sir?
Oh, really good, really good. Thank you for having me back on.
Absolutely. What do you make of this headline? Because we had just talked about this like 2 weeks ago, you and me, about how they said 12 years until it's irreversible, and now they're saying, well, no, actually 18 months. I think that's actually conveniently pretty close to the presidential election too, by the way.
Yeah, this is crazy. And when we were on last, we talked about all these other predictions we've seen over, well, really since the last 30 years, and none of them have come to pass. It all started Al Gore predicting that New York City would be underwater, people predicting London would be underwater, Miami by now. None of these have come to pass. And, if we look at what's actually happening, the rate of sea level rise is part of what they're really worried about. And we're at less than, it's risen less than a foot over the last 100-plus years. It's very insignificant. And it all started, as you know, we've talked about back in the mid-1800s as we were coming out of the death-dealing cold of the Little Ice Age. And during that Little Ice Age, it was 1250 to 1800 or so. That's when the glaciers, huge glacial advances occurred throughout Europe and North America. And it's those glacial retreats that lifted us out of the death-dealing cold of the horrifically cold Little Ice Age that have brought us into this blessed warmth that we're experiencing now. And it's not tremendously warmed. It's warmed about 1.5 degrees since 1850. So it's not a significant amount of warming. But again, all this warming, the bulk of this has occurred prior to us adding the huge amounts of that demon gas CO2 to the atmosphere. And if you see the back of my truck, I've got a bumper sticker that says "I heart CO2." When I go to speak at places, I've got buttons I hand out with "I heart CO2" buttons, because I'm a really, really big proponent of the many benefits that the Earth and humanity are experiencing from increasing CO2 and rising temperatures. Those two are combining to show Earth and humanity tremendous benefits.
You mentioned this Little Ice Age, and I have to wonder, this mini ice age. Back in the 70s, you can go find the articles that talked about global cooling. And, that was, one of the fears, that maybe we are going to digress. We are going to retreat back into something that historically we can actually know happened. This mini ice age. We know it actually happened. So was that some of the basis originally for this fear?
Well, they're not looking. You mean the fear of 12 years? No. They're not looking at history at all, and which really we need to do. And that's what I do as a geologist. I put this in a long-term context to show that we are in cycles of rising and falling temperatures. The one thing I say about temperature, the only thing constant about temperature is it's either rising or falling. It's never constant, and we see this time and time again. But yet, if people like Al Gore and the like, they can't admit that natural forces can drive temperatures. If they admit that they want you and your listeners have to believe that the current temperatures we're at and the slight rise we've seen is unusual and unprecedented. We've never seen anything like it in 2,000 years. But we know just the opposite is that they're just not right, and they're not looking at the history. If we look back through these other warm periods, well, for crying out loud, Paul, the Romans, when they occupied England, they were growing citrus in the north of England near Hadrian's Wall. Well, you can't grow citrus anywhere in England today. Wow. Nowhere near that high of a latitude. Things like that we can look at and say, well, it had to have been warmer, right? There's no way you're going to grow citrus today in England. We see that large areas in Greenland, the Vikings were growing barley and many crops. We see that there are still Vikings deeply buried in the permafrost of Greenland. Well, it had to have been warmer for them to dig the graves to bury these guys in, and gals. So just looking at historical fact, and that's what I'm doing with my next book that I'm in the process of writing, just the beginning stages now. I think it's a fascinating way to look at climate and temperature, is to look at the past through humanities, through our not just the Earth's history, but human history. And one of the great stories that we have are from the late Middle Ages, as we started coming out of what was called the High Middle Ages, the warmth of the medieval warm period. That was the time of great cathedral building, blossoming technology, where empires were rising up. And then it started getting cold. And it was kind of, well, it wasn't funny if you were a weather-causing witch being burned at the stake, but as it started getting cold, what we always see is crops fail. The cold periods are associated with crop failure, famine, pestilence, and mass depopulation. And in the Little Ice Age, we saw the same thing. Around in the 13th century, it started getting cold, crops failed. The people blamed it on weather-causing witches. And in the 14th century, the Pope actually issued a papal bull stating that, yes, there were things there were weather-causing witches. So basically, the Pope said, have at it, boys. And man, they did. For the next several hundred years, there were somewhere between 30 and 40,000 supposed witches burned at the stake. Most of them burned at the stake, some drowned.
And you're saying, I guess I've never heard it was over weather.
Yeah. These were weather-causing witches that created the famines and so on. Now, this is the in Europe, mostly Germany, France, Belgium, throughout most of Europe. But what was funny, well, it's not funny really, but it's around 1500 it started warming up again, and the crops came back. Well, why did the crops come back, Paul? They killed all the witches.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, that's what they said. Oh, yeah. But that only lasted about 40 years, and then it really started getting cold. And that's when, and I've got a chart that I'm going to be adding in my book, and what I talk about. It's a chart relating the number of witches killed by decade with the temperatures during that period. And it's just a great correlation. It's kind of a fascinating story that most people have never heard. But what it does is highlights the dangers of cold. Mm-hmm. We're being told, oh my God, we're all going to die, crops are going to fail because we're going to get it. Temperatures are going to increase by 1.5 degrees. Well, come on, man. That we did not see that in the history of humanity. When it warms up, great things happen to humanity, and it's happened time and time again. Each of those past periods, they were the Minoan warm period, the Roman, and the medieval warm period, were times of great prosperity, and food was plentiful.
Yeah.
And those are the times they're telling us, oh, well, forget what happened in the past. This is going to happen this time.
Yeah.
And these things that the catastrophes they're predicting are based on failed climate models that overpredict warming too much. And what I like to do, they're making prognostications of what may or may not happen 58 or 100 years in the future, I look at what's happening today, and I see just about every case we look at, we see things improving, things getting better. If we look at the last 100 years of human history, of our history, what do we see? If we look in the historical rearview mirror, man, we're just getting better and better and better. More food, more longer life expectancy, better health, cleaner air. Everything's getting better and better. And they say, oh, no, that's all going to change.
Yeah.
And all I see and all they do is look at doom, despair, and destruction.
Gosh,
is what they predict for the future.
And this is I guess this is the I guess maybe the historical difference. You know, they were burning witches to try to control the weather, but there were actually consequences. We could see that, hey, they could see there, you know, we can't grow our food. It's too cold. And so what are they saying, like you were saying, you know, what are the current day results where we're saying, wow, there really truly is a problem here? And from what I'm hearing from you is, Gregory Wrightstone, is there isn't one.
I don't see a problem. What they're doing with banning fossil fuels and moving away from fossil fuels and the things like the Green New Deal and the Paris Climate Accord, well, I call them solutions in search of a problem. Because what they're saying is going to happen, shouldn't we see some evidence of that today? Shouldn't we see, and what they're pointing to as evidence, when you actually look at the science, the facts, and the data, it's just opposite of what they're saying. We see benefits. And I like to look at forest fires as a great example. We see there's a decline in the number of fires worldwide, North America, United States, and even in California. California, the number of fires have declined by almost 50% in the last 30 years, and nobody knows it.
No.
Now, the area burned has increased. When I tell people that, they look at me with like a side eye going, what's this guy been smoking? And then they look at the data, and it's data from CAL FIRE, and they go, wow. So the area burned has increased. So these fires are much bigger and more intense. But that's a forest management issue, not a global warming issue. And we see that with droughts. They're telling us that droughts are expanding and are going to become terrible. If you look at the big droughts, they've actually been in significant decline. And both of those are related because of rising temperature and increasing CO2, we're seeing a greening of the earth. And you can just Google, if you don't believe me, Google NASA and greening and see what you find. You'll find that the earth, up to 50% of the earth is what they call greening. Vegetation's increasing. They're telling us it's decreasing and the earth is turning into a vast desert. Just the opposite is happening. We're expanding. Up to 50% of the earth is greening. Less than 4%, according to NASA, is what they call browning or loss of vegetation. Wow. That's a really good trade-off, man. I'd take that any day of the week.
Yeah.
50% pro and less than 4% going the other way.
I mean, you know, I think this is refreshing. I just want you to know Gregory Wrightstone, who, you know, he's a geologist. He's an author, Inconvenient Facts, the Science That Al Gore Doesn't Want You to Know. You should check out the book. But I can just feel the audience like, wow, it's good to hear somebody that knows what they're talking about on this issue, because obviously the media and the left and the Democrats, I mean, the only thing we ever hear is that, you know, it is real, you know, we're all going to die in 12 years. And some of that's enforced by Hollywood, you know, with those movies like The Day After Tomorrow or whatever it was called, where all of the sudden, you know, there were no signs and all of a sudden, you know, we're facing this terrible weather event, you know, across the globe. And it's just frustrating. And their solutions, and I want to remind everybody, all of their solutions to deal with this so-called problem are socialistic in nature, aren't they?
Oh, they are. And AOC's chief of staff, who was the prime architect of the Green New Deal, let the cat out of the bag 2 weeks ago. And he, in an interview with the Washington Post, he asked the interviewer, well, do you think this, and he was referring to the Green New Deal, do you think this is really about the environment or climate change? He says, no. This is about reordering the economic policies of the world and the United States. And he admitted it.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about. And thank you for your compliments about bringing this a lot of this information. Your listeners, we have a smartphone app that is a companion to the book. I advise, I mean, the book has been a great resource. And you know what? We were just #1 bestseller on Amazon in the last 2 weeks in a couple of categories.
Wow.
So it's really been word of mouth that's gotten this word out there. But this smartphone app, it's a powerful tool. It lists all 60 inconvenient facts that you can have in the palm of your hand, and you can get that at the App Store, Google Play. Just search for inconvenient facts, and it comes right up. So many people are so happy with it because it gives them the power to have this information right there in the palm of their hand.
Now it's also on an iPhone, correct, as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
it
was taken
right
down
now.
by Apple. Tim Cook and Apple took it off the App Store. We were down for about 2.5 months and finally got it back up last month. So it's now available.
Nice. I'm getting it right now, Gregor. That's pretty cool. That's really
You will
cool.
love it. You will use it. People tell me, I use this 4 or 5 times a week when I'm talking to people because they never had anything like this before where you could. And I use it when I'm traveling. I spoke in Beaufort, South Carolina last week. Tomorrow night I'm going to Wilmington, North Carolina to speak, and then next week to Wichita, Kansas to speak out there. So I travel all around, and as I'm traveling, just meeting new people at restaurants, I can pull out this app and show them information. And people are thirsty for this information.
Wow. Yeah, I just downloaded it. Inconvenient facts, the science that Al Gore doesn't want you to know, 10 inconvenient facts. Gregory Wrightstone, we appreciate you coming on as always, and we thank you so much, sir.
All right, thank you.
All righty, folks, we're going to take a break.